before I tell this story, which I'll of course be telling anonymously, I ask that anyone reading or listening please try not to judge me too harshly. I know that's a lot to ask, especially when you actually hear the story, but I'm willing to guess that the majority of people who will soon know it have never and will never be put in a situation quite like it. As far as you know, you may have responded exactly like I did. I was one of those transplanted people who was born in the city and was moved out to the country as a teenager. I was 15 years old when my folks decided to move away from the city. It happened because my dad had fallen ill. His doctors had recommended that he retire early and do whatever he could to reduce his stress levels, so he retired. My parents sold our house, and they bought a home in a very rural area. When transplanted people tell others that it's a major adjustment, they are not kidding. It was difficult to get used to the things that made the country and city differ. First was the lack of people. It wasn't like there were just less people. There was a total lack of people. The roads up the hills were either all dirt or covered in rocks, and while I'm at it, I really don't understand the point of those roads covered with rocks either. Wouldn't that be bad for the tires of a car? Wouldn't it make more sense to just leave it as dirt? I don't know. So yeah, that was all really a shock to me. We moved right after the end of the school year. My parents figured it would be difficult enough for me to change school for the first time, much less have to jump in right in the middle of a school year, so it was late May when we moved to the new place. Without school, it would be several months before I could even begin making new friends. There were other houses in the area, although they were not close. They were all senior citizens whose children had already grown up and moved away. I was in for a very long, hot, and quite lonely summer. I can't begin to tell you how much time I spent just doing everything indoors. I spent time on my computer, time watching movies, time reading books. I spent so much time not even getting to know my surroundings and just developing a bit of cabin fever. It was my mom who convinced me that I needed to begin exploring the area around me. I didn't really enjoy it too much at first, though. Walking up and down the rocky road was really not fun. It was just the same thing over and over again. I have to admit that I felt a little bit stupid after my mom explained to me that that was not quite what she meant. She wanted me to go and explore the wilderness areas that surrounded us. I started to go on some pretty short hikes at first. Each time I went, I just tried to get a little bit further and a little bit further after that. I was first getting worried about getting lost. It took quite a while before I was actually brave enough to wander off on my own. I very quickly discovered that I had to just bravely go and explore, without that fear of getting lost, in order to enjoy hiking at all. Once I did, though, I found that my mom was right. I sincerely enjoyed going out and exploring. It was such a different world, and I was enjoying finding the most of it. Yeah, I was still a little bit lonely, but that was no big deal. I suppose I should get to the point, though. I was out exploring for a long time one day. I ventured deeper and deeper out into the woods. Beforehand, I had traveled pretty far a few times, but I kept going deeper and deeper every time. I had never once run into any other people before, so I was surprised when I suddenly heard a noise that sounded like someone else was out there. It sounded like someone coughing, although I can't quite be sure though. At first, I thought that maybe I should just head back home. I might have been trespassing on someone's private property without knowing it. But the more I thought about it, I decided that if I came across someone who owned the land, I could just tell them that I got lost. So, I walked in that direction that I was sure I'd heard the coughing noise come from. As I got closer and closer, though, I didn't hear any more noises. After walking for quite a bit, I realized that whoever, if anyone, had been out in the forest, they were probably long gone by now. Instead of walking back the way I had come, though, I cut back in a different direction. After walking for a short while, I came across the shock of my life. There was someone, a person, lying in the dead leaves on the ground. I stopped approaching them for a moment. I figured it must be someone who was injured, so I got up closer to the person. I approached, and the body still did not move at all. This frightened me because I began to think this person must have been dead. A chill swept through my body when that thought rushed through my mind. As I got closer, I noticed the person was still moving, but he was severely injured. It looked like his arm was broken, and he had blood covering his entire face. As he saw me, he tried to get up. My instinct was to run, and run I did. I was just too freaked out. Not only that, I was also afraid that maybe the coughing sound I had heard was from whoever had attacked this man, and the last thing I wanted to do was draw that person right back there. That was the shameful thing I mentioned at the beginning of the story. I know it was the wrong thing to do, but at that moment, I was more concerned for myself than anyone. I ran in the direction that I assumed would take me back to the road. When I did, I kept going up the road and back to my house. The entire time, I kept expecting the guy who had done the evil deed would see me on the road and would do it to me too. When I got home, I immediately went to my parents and told them what had happened. My dad called the police but went out to get the car. It would take quite a while for the police to arrive, and he didn't want to chance the guy dying before they got there. He told my mom to tell the police to look for his car on the side of the road. I had to go back with my dad to show him the approximate area it was when I made it back to the road. We then went out into the forest to look for the injured man. My dad brought his gun with him, just in case we ran into the person who had done this. We did end up finding the man. He was still alive. I was extremely happy, because if he had passed away, I definitely would have shared some of the blame for running away like a coward. My dad and I helped the man into the car and placed him in the back seat. The police hadn't quite arrived yet, so we drove back to the house. Shortly after we arrived, the police and an ambulance arrived as well. The man ended up living. The man who had done this to him in the first place was easily caught afterwards and then went to jail. I've always felt bad about this, and I realized that I should feel bad for what I did, but I'm thankful that it all ended up good in the end. Around the time that I was 15 years old, I would spend certain parts of the summer with different relatives. As my immediate family was quite poor, I really enjoyed the time that I could spend with my aunt and her 2 children. She wasn't rich by any means. She lived in a trailer on the side of the road. It was a pretty nice trailer though, and she always had air conditioning. She would take us to rent movies, and there was always at least decent food to eat and to have snacks. Nowadays, you won't find me swimming at all anymore, but at the time, I really enjoyed when we would go out into a creek in the area and just go for a swim. Getting to the creek originally took a small hike into the woods, but it was pretty easy to find, because the creek was long and we would just follow it. The area that we would swim in was more like a spot of the creek that was like a pond than a flowing river. It was also deep enough for us to swim around and have a good time. One time during that summer, just my male cousin and I, who is practically my age, decided to go and swim by ourselves in the creek. His sister didn't want to come with us, and neither did mine, so it was just going to be the 2 of us. We were playing there, having a nice time, when something happened that had never happened before. All of a sudden, 2 older and much larger guys, maybe around 17 years old apiece, came up upon the creek. We didn't notice them at first, but once they began picking up our clothes and shoes, we noticed them real fast. My cousin Jim was the first one to notice. "Hey, what the hell are you doing?" he asked. He began to swim closer to the shore of the creek. Jim didn't get very far, however. Both of the older boys pulled switchblades out of their pockets. "I wouldn't do that if I was you," they told Jim. He, of course, stopped. "What the hell is wrong with you, Aaron?" Jim asked. It was only at that point that I realized that Jim seemed to know these 2 people. "We have the knives, so we'll ask the questions," Aaron told him. "Who is this, Jimmy? Your new boyfriend?" "Screw you." "Just for that, you give us your swim trunks." Aaron's friend instructed, and both of them laughed. "Hell no." Aaron and his friend stopped laughing. Aaron walked forward, brandishing his knife at my cousin. I'll come into the water and cut 'em off you, but if I do that, I'll be cutting off more than just those trunks." "I'm not taking my damn trunks off," Jim said defiantly. I honestly didn't expect what happened next. Aaron jumped fully clothed into the water and began splashing around, doing his best to chase after Jim. Of course, Jim was trying to get away, but he wasn't able to do a very good job at it. In no time at all, Aaron had Jim from behind and was holding him with his arm around his neck. "I wonder what I'm gonna cut off first," Aaron said angrily. He took the knife and pressed it against different parts of Jim's body. Maybe an ear would be good. Aaron's friend had been laughing at first, but he actually stopped and began to look really nervous. He didn't talk at all, though. Jim was also scared now. Okay, I'll take off my shorts." "Too late for that. Now you're gonna lose a body part too." Time froze for both of us, I think. Aaron pierced Jim's temple with the knife, and that got a strong reflex from Jim. He swung his arm out in pain and shock. Doing that caused Aaron to drop the knife, which fell into the creek. With the knife gone, I splashed over to where Jim and Aaron were. I was able to, along with Jim struggling, get Aaron off of him. Aaron's friend ran off while this was happening, rather than going into the water to help Aaron out, and without his knife, Aaron had no chance alone against both Jim and I. He sped over to the shore and out of the water. Once he was out, he began cussing up a storm, threatening both of us, and blaming us for losing his knife. He took our clothes and shoes, and threw them into the water. Then he ran off. Jim and I collected our stuff, and he dove into the water to find the knife. After that, we went home. We told his aunt what happened, and we had the knife for proof as well. She called the police, and we went with them over to Aaron's house. The police took Aaron away. As my aunt had said, she was absolutely going to press charges. I don't know what happened after that, though. It was a long time ago, and I'm not sure my aunt ever wanted to explain it to us, but it was a very scary experience for all of us involved. This happened when I was really young. I was at my grandma's house. She was divorced from her husband long before I was born. She lived with her two youngest sons, who were a lot younger than my parents were. My grandma, my aunts, and my dad were the type to go to bars a whole lot, and whenever we went to visit Grandma, they would leave all us cousins at home while they went out and about and went drinking. My mom went with them because my dad insisted, but she had never been much of a drinker herself. My two uncles, the ones that lived with my grandma, were underage too, but they were supposed to be the ones watching us. They weren't even much older than us, though. I guess that was just sort of the way my family was back then. This night it was like that. Everyone had been gone for quite a while. My uncles and my older brother knew that our parents would be out for quite a long time, so they had what they thought was a good idea. They were going to take the keys to my grandma's pickup truck and go out for a bit of a ride. Now, of course, they were not allowed to do anything like this, and they were not allowed to leave us alone either, so they decided that the three of them would sit in the front of the truck, and the rest of us four cousins would be sitting in the bed. There wasn't a top on the truck, so we were basically just sitting outside. My grandma lived way out in the country. The roads that we were driving on were narrow country roads that winded throughout the hills. To make things worse, my brother and uncles had taken a few beers out of the fridge and were drinking while driving the truck around. To give you a bit of an idea of how rural this was and how thin the road was, we several times had to duck to keep branches from scratching us on the face. I was the oldest of the four cousins in the back of the truck, and I was only 9 years old, so you can imagine just how scary the experience was for us. It was dark as hell, and the only light was in front of the truck. Then, they stopped the truck at the end of a driveway. Taking their BB guns, they told the four of us to remain there until they got back. I was a 9-year-old, left with 3 younger children in the back of a truck in the hills, in the middle of the freaking night. I guess it was my job to keep us from being scared, but I was scared myself. So all I could do was sit there with those other 3 kids, looking around and trying not to get too frightened. Then, we heard a gunshot. It wasn't a BB gunshot, it was a real gunshot. All 3 of my younger cousins began crying right away. I pulled them closer to me and tried to keep them from being too frightened, but it was hard for me to do that when I was terrified. It wasn't long before my 2 uncles and my brother came running toward the truck. They got into it fast and yelled at us to keep our heads down, so we did. My uncle took off like a bat out of hell. He didn't have time to turn around, so we just went deeper and deeper into the hills. The driveway he was at was the place he could have turned around, but I guess he decided to keep looking for another. All 4 of us in the back kept hunkered down. However, I heard my uncles freaking out because they had gotten us lost. They didn't know how to get back, and seemed like they were just as scared now as we were. I peeked up a few times, but it was too dark for me to see anything. We drove around for what seemed like forever in the dark. The other 3 children were crying, convinced we were never going to make it back home, and I was young enough to think that was true as well. Eventually there was a light ahead of us. My brother and uncles lost their shit. They thought that the person who had shot at them had found them, but it was even worse for them. It was my mom. Our parents had gotten home, and were all drunk but noticed we were gone. My mom went out looking for them with one of my aunts. My mom put us kids in the car, put my brother and uncles in the back of the truck, and my aunt drove the truck home when my mom drove the car home. Well, turned out what happened was that there was this old man who made moonshine, and was basically a hermit. My brother and uncles got it in their mind to steal some of that moonshine, so when they noticed him, they shot him with a BB gun. That was when he started shooting back. Of course, my brother and uncles were in deep shit. I don't support spanking your kids, but after what happened, when my grandma handed each one of them a pocket knife and told them, "All 3 of you cut me a switch," I didn't feel any sympathy for them at all. What is up, guys? Blue Spooky here. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far to the end of the video. If you guys liked the video, please be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe if you feel so inclined. That sort of stuff really helps me out with the audience engagement and really helps my videos get out to a lot more people. So hopefully we can get to that 1 million one day. Help me out, guys. That'd be great. Once again, starting this week on the second channel, we're going to be doing some true crime stuff, probably twice a week if I feel in the mood for it, and feel like doing all the research required. Those will be on Wednesdays/Thursdays and Saturdays/Sundays probably. So look forward to that if you're interested. There's a link to my second channel in the description. The name is Mr. Blue Sky, so keep an eye out for that. If you guys feel like contacting me for any reason, links to all of my social media will be in the description below, including my Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail accounts. Send me a message on any of those, and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as possible. If you do decide to send in a story, please make sure that it has proper grammar, and try to include as much detail as possible so it's long enough for me to include in a video. Also, please be sure to include in the tagline what the name of the story is, if it has one, what type of story it is, if it has a theme, and how you would like to be credited in the description of the video the story appears in. If you guys are curious about the art used in this video, links to my artist, Alan, will be in the description below. He does a lot of horror art stuff, and he's really good at it. He also does commissions, so if you guys have any projects you want to work on or something, please be sure to check him out. He can probably get you something really good. As usual, links to the music used in the video will be in the description below in the order which it appears. I think that's pretty much all for now, guys, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys have a great day.